Today what I want to talk about is Process Simulator. So Process Simulator is one of those tools that we have that we haven't used quite as much as ProModel. We tend to use ProModel because ProModel is like the big brother of Process Simulator. But Process Simulator works very much like ProModel in that you can build a model and you can, it basically compiles it into a model. And a lot of the reporting features and everything that are built into ProModel are also in the Process Simulator. It's also nice because it does have a virtual license just like ProModel, so you can check it out and we can share it amongst ourselves. You can install on your computer, and then you can check out the license and terminate it and stuff, so we can move it around. But basically, the way ProModel Process Simulator works is it uses Visio flow diagrams. So this is a real simple example of a medical clinic model that we have. And so we have a patient coming into a reception area. We have a call coming in. And then the patient either exit here or they go to the waiting room. So a percentage of them might exit. And then we have options. So they can go to a treatment room. And then from there, things go to a lab. And then from the treatment rooms, they'll go to a second waiting room and then to the doctor's office. So it's a real simple process. And we also have resources. We have receptionists over here that are assigned to tasks, and we have nurses and lab techs and doctors. Now, the interesting thing about this particular example is there's a lab here, and that lab itself is actually denoted by a second sub-model, which can be created on a second page. So the lab actually, samples come in, the blood goes through a centrifuge, they run tests, they analyze them, and then they go out. If it's urine, it comes in, it goes right to the urine test, and comes out. So you can create, if you can imagine, a flow diagram with sub-flow diagrams and model it. Now, the nice thing is, because as industrial engineers, a lot of times we build flow diagrams, this is kind of a natural extension. And so the way it works is Process Simulator, when you have it installed, actually has its own separate menu system here, and also has its own menu system down here in icons. So in this example, each one of these icons here is smart. So here's patients. So if I click on that and I click on properties, you can see here we can define certain things. Like in this case, there are periodic arrivals of patients. They come, and there's a distribution here for how often they come. It could be a periodic. It could be continuous. It could be scheduled. You could have a schedule that you put in. You can even read in a schedule. You can do it ordered, which means you get something else will order the patients in, another item. It's very similar to what we do with ProModel. Let's say every time we get one of these, we have to order one of these. Or we can also do patterns. So here's an example of a pattern where we might say every Monday from 8 to 9 we have something happen. And we can repeat it by weeks, days, hours, or minutes. And then there's logic. Just like with ProModel, you can put in logic where you intermediate counters and things like that. So it's got a lot of things that you can do. Now, each one of these activities, every item can either be an activity, a buffer, a storage, an entity, or a resource. And so essentially what you're doing, again, you could take a regular flow diagram and you can define it. You would just basically go in here and define it as an activity, and then you can set how long it takes. In this case, it takes 0 minutes, but we can assign different resources to do this activity, how available the activity is, what the cost is. So lots of different things. We can also create scenarios. So in this case, we can create a baseline scenario. We can say, what if we added another nurse? What if we have a batch size for urine tests and make it 2? What if we change the capacity of certain things? So we can create different scenarios. So once we create a flow diagram, we can put basically this modeling information on it, and we can run it. And you can see this is kind of what it looks like. We have phone calls coming in for patients. It will tell us for items, how many are sitting in queue. Like this tells you how many are in queue, how many are sitting in the out queue. And also show us dynamically when people are busy. You can see our receptionists are flashing on and off. We're keeping track of how many people have exited the system here, how many have exited over here. Over here we've got our samples running through our lab. So it's a really nice tool, and we can keep track of some things down here. It's really nice in that, unlike ProModel, there's less programming. It's really very much, people can understand a flow diagram, and if you can create a flow diagram, you can do this. It's just basically adding on another level of information. And you can see I'm running multiple, like 30 different runs of each one, so it considers the fact that there's variation. And to do really statistical modeling, you do need to run several iterations of each model. So if I turn off the graphics on this, it's now run 30 of every single one of my scenarios just in that amount of time. So it's much, much faster than ProModel, and that the models are a lot simpler, so you can run them much quicker. And then if we open up the results here, it lets us look at, it looks like it just ran the baseline here. It must not have had the other ones checked, but it gives us all the same kind of information that we get with ProModel. We can keep track of entity states, like patients, what percent of the time are they moving, waiting, in operation, or blocked. And you can see in this case, patients are pretty much spending their whole time waiting. There's a lot of, 80% of the time they're waiting.
It's pretty accurate. Typical doctor's office.
Yeah. And again, samples, 30% of the time's waiting, 37% they're in operation, 10% they're blocked. We can look at resource states. How busy are our resources? So this would tell us that, our nurses are the busiest right now. We must have had some downtime we defined for our tester, but in general our tester is only like 34% busy for the auto tester for the lab. So there's a lot of different types of analyses we can do with this. Let me see why. Yeah, I got them on here. See if this runs them all this time. All right, so I ran the first one. That's running the second one. There we go. That's running the third one. So it's basically running each scenario. Really super fast, of course. Okay. So now that we've run it in multiple scenarios, we can come in here and we can going to generate the reports. So we can generate comparisons. So like additional nurse versus baseline. We can look at the reports and say, okay, baseline for patients, here's what happens. We add an additional nurse, it really didn't affect things that much, right? It looks like it didn't affect, like samples had a little bit less move time for additional nurse, but it didn't have a big impact. But you can imagine, you can go through each one of these and you can say incrementally what will each one of these do. So it lets you run different experiments very quickly. So we'll just go back a minute. So just to show you how simple this is, so if I create a new model, let's see here, file, new process simulator. So let's just say I bring in an entity client, and I have an activity, another activity, and another activity, and maybe like a decision thing, and then one other activity. And then I'll terminate it, and that'll be it. So then I'll just come in here, and And I'll just drag some little things in this. This activity can, percentage of the time, it'll go back. Okay. So now we have a little model here. I can go into here, and I want to bring in an entity. So I have a client coming in periodically. Is going to go to each one of these activities. I haven't done anything yet. I've just created a flow diagram. But now I can come in and start modeling it, and you can see I've basically just created a model. And it defaults to some things, like 50% of them go on and 50% come back. So now if I wanted to go to the next level, now that I have this model, I can go in and start to add in some information like properties. Say, with this activity, what is it? Does it need a certain resource? I can define a resource. Anyway, so in general, I think it's a very powerful tool that we can use. I think you can use this for manufacturing. And they do have some model demonstrations here for how you can use it for distribution centers and stuff. I think our models tend to be a lot more complicated than this, but I think it's a really nice tool if we're going to do process improvement within an area. If it's something where you can create a flow diagram, then I think this is a nice front-end tool. Now, the other thing you can do with this model is once you've created it, you can also export it into ProModel and use it as the basis for a more complicated model. So if you wanted to model a business process, you can get it so far with this. And if you want to take it to the next level and make it more complicated, then you can import it into ProModel and then build it off of that. Does anybody have any questions about this?
Nope.
I have a question about the experiment.
What?
Can you hear me?
Yeah. What was your question?
I have a question about the experiment.
Yeah.
Are you? I feel like I've learned parts of this before. Are you able to set up the experiment so you tell it what you want it to minimize or maximize, like when it runs the experiments, to find the best?
No. So ProModel, what she's talking about is ProModel actually has an optimizer where you can set up optimization. I want to optimize these variables. I'm going to weight it a certain way. And then, or maybe it's just cost. Maybe you want to minimize cost. And you can tell it what things to control, and you can tell it what range you can control them within. Like certain things you can go up and down by within a certain range. And what ProModel will do is we'll actually run a model and then learn from it, and we'll run a series of models to try to optimize to that. This won't let you do that. I mean, what this will let you do is it will let you create, you can take any activity, any entity, any resource, and you can make it into a parameter. And essentially, even if there's something in there, it will replace whatever's in that parameter with what you have for that experiment. So if I want to change the capacity of activity 2, and maybe I add another, so I go ahead and add that. So now I've gone ahead and created these parameters. If I add a scenario, I can go in and set it, like say, I'm going to make this, what if this is actually 2? You know, or what if it's 3? So it actually will go in and substitute these values for that capacity of that activity. Capacity means how many can it work on at a time. So if I say, well, what if I have 1 of them, what if I have 2 of them, what if I have 3 of them, and it will, as it runs the scenarios, it will modify that one parameter. You can, I mean, you can change like anything. You can change arrivals, how quickly stuff comes in. You could change capacity, cost, speed. I mean, I don't have any resources defined, or you'd be able to also adjust those. But it gives you a lot of options for coming up with scenarios. But what it won't do is it won't do an optimization. You'd still have to manually define the scenarios to run. Does that make sense, Beth?
Yeah. Thanks.
Yeah. ProModel will do it. Process Simulator won't. And a lot of things that used to not be available in Process Simulator are now available. You can do macros. You can create subroutines. You can read in files. You can go into, and this is stuff that was never available in previous versions, you can go in and do logic just like you would ProModel. You can do assignments, if logic. So a lot of the stuff that you used to never build, you could never do this before. It even has a logic builder. You can do conditional statements. A lot of the things that were always available in ProModel but never in Process Simulator are now available. So you can make a fairly complicated model with Process Simulator compared to how it used to be. Now again, is it as complicated? No. Like here's one. I'll open this one. This is a fairly complicated model. It's got like a Kanban system running where it calls parts based on what's going on and assembles things. There's like a cab welding area, which is really funny since we're looking at doing a proposal for a company with cab welding from last week. So you set up queues and you can track things through the system. They're actually making trucks. So you can make some pretty sophisticated models with this. And if we can use this to make a model and it doesn't take much more time, it's probably more conducive to our clients being able to use it. It's a less expensive program than, ProModel. So
what are the graphic options? Like, can you bring in some kind of layout, or you pretty much just stick to
yes,
there?
you can bring in backgrounds. So I could bring in a layout. But like I can't do a path network. Like it's not sophisticated enough to do that. It's still limited to a flow diagram. An easy way to think about it is if I click on one of these, I'm still limited to activities, buffers, storage, entities, and resources. So like a storage unit would be like this. So there's only certain things with a storage unit you can define. You can define the capacity. There are triggers for ordering things to it, initial levels. There are certain things that you can do. You can't put in logic though. So, but basically you have all the main general process flow elements that you would have in a normal flow diagram: activities, buffer, storage, entities, and resources. And you can put in move times and stuff, but I don't think it's spatial. Like you can't drag something and have it adjust the distance. Like if I go to one of these, like this one here, I can say how long it takes. So this says it takes 1 day to get from one to the other. I think it's actually going to another facility in this model. So I can adjust this, but it's all got to be hand put in. You can't. It won't like drag it around or figure out how long it is. Any other questions?
Nope, not here in Toledo.
So this is a software package we own. We do pay maintenance on it. It kind of comes with ProModel because they're trying to get people to use it more, but it is a tool we have available. So if you think there's an opportunity to use it to help a client improve their operations, then let me know. I mean, even if we put together a little demo model for them, you can see it doesn't really take a long time to put together a model. All right. So if there are no questions, then I think we're good then.